Hey, good morning, everybody. What an introduction. Thank you so much. I We have a limited time together, so I don't want to do much chit chat. Thank you for taking some time on a Saturday morning to be here. I saw Abner there. Hey, man, love that guy. And I really just want to dump a whole lot of content on you, if that's okay. If we get time to unpack some of that, fantastic. If you want to grab me offline to argue, unpack, and deliberate, I'm happy to do that. My heart is to stir you to shift your perspective slightly, right? And so, where I'd like to go today, I'm going to just show you some slides because they're much more entertaining to watch than watching me. But I think it's really important on this journey, um, and I won't spend a lot of time unpacking details because of our time, if that's okay. Is I just want to show you why something is so different than what we've ever seen before. And my heart is, and I really believe the Lord's given us a real strategy to understand something has shifted, something is different, and therefore our behavior and our actions need to be different accordingly, right? And so that's what I want to unpack with you. Please listen fast. And I'm just going to give you a bird's eye view, and we can drill into anything should you want to do that. So I hope that's good with you. I'm going to dive in. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, listen fast. Come on, isn't that the best? I should write that down. Um, can you give me permission to share my screen, please? And then I will hopefully be able to share these. There we go. And sorry, I'm just going to share this for 1 second. And then we will get to you. That ain't it. Okay. All right. Can you see that okay? Cody, you good?
It's great. Yep.
Okay. All right, gentlemen. So, and ladies, um, where we're really starting is here. The whole premise of this journey, I want to show you why it matters so much, is we're going to move from rows into circles. And on this journey, and I've been able to speak to all sorts of organizations and businesses and faith-driven organizations globally, and they're all trying to answer the same question. Their processes and strategies that they've been navigating or using have just not given the same kind of results. And part of the experience, come on, if that isn't that not the best cartoon ever? Right there. I mean, that sums up, and so that should be a wrap. Any questions? Because if you get that, then we don't need a further conversation, right? That's all we need. So I'm going to dive in and show you why this is the case. There are some data points I just want to kick off with. 52% of the world's population is under the age of 30, and Gen Z and Alpha really make up that. Some people say Beta started this year, Beta generation. It's still to be determined. We'll see if that's going to stick or not. But 52% of the world population, that's significant, right? And there's so much more. They became the biggest cohort in the US workforce in September last year. So we're talking about a generation. There's not just teenagers anymore, right? They're in working roles, they're in leadership roles. But the reason I'm talking about Gen Z and Alpha in the same breath is because their behavior is the same. And what we've learned from them is that there's a different strategy required to lead them well. And as a result of looking at the fruit on the tree, we figured out over the last 15 years ways to do that in a really productive way. And in part, that's what I want to share with you, right? Kids that are in seventh grade this year, 65% of them will work in jobs that don't exist. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because when you recognize the significance of what that actually means, you'll start to recognize that if we're still navigating relationships like we did when you were in youth group or like when you were in middle school, you'll realize why the fruit on the tree might not look exactly the same. And my desire for you today is just to have a shift in perspective, right? If we have a different perspective on who this generation is and how they are wired, the data that I'm touching on today is going to show you that they're fundamentally wired different. We have never encountered a generation that is completely wired different to any other generation. And that's what Alpha and Gen Z really are. And the stories that I love, there's so many stories in the Bible that really bring parallels to this. And it's just a parallel, but I want to catch just two thoughts for you. The one is Philip goes down this in the desert road south into the desert and meets the eunuch, right? This is going to introduce for you just a concept that the reason the eunuch, and I'm not going to unpack it in detail, the reason the eunuch says to him, come up and sit next to me, is because Philip had something of value to give the eunuch. Mm-hmm. Don't miss that, okay? That's a key point. It wasn't just being nice. He wasn't just like, hey, dude, you're wandering around the desert, come sit there. No, no, no. He had value to give the eunuch. And in this instance, the eunuch is a version of Gen Z and Alpha Gen. And then one of my favorite stories, David and Goliath. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that one. There's this giant in the desert, right? I don't know if it was in the desert, but so here's what goes on in my version in the NLT right here. It says that David is trying to convince Saul that he wants to go and kill the giant. And Saul says in this version, don't be ridiculous. Like, please, can I go and kill the giant? Saul says, don't be ridiculous. Why? Because there was so much riding on that moment, right? And then after he gives testimony, David gives him testimony, Saul's perspective changes. Come on. And he says, go. But here's what I want you to see. When Saul reaches back, he gets his armor and he says to David, here's my armor. If Saul was really had a real shift in perspective, I want to celebrate that he said, here, take my armor. He was trying to do something. But what I want you to see is that if he was really in tune with who Gen Z was, that's a parallel, he would have reached back and pulled out 5 stones and not offered him the armor. So what I'm showing you is the best intentions aren't always the best if they aren't plugged in the right way, which is what I'm calling from a change of perspective for you to catch. So here's what we know, that every generation goes through a phase. That's always been the case, right? And when you're a teenager, that's your job. You're supposed to go through a phase. And I can unpack the psychology that's connected to that. We're not going to have time for that today. But here's what I want you to see. Gen Z are not just going through a phase. We've understood and now know that they're actually wired differently. I wrote a book called Aliens Among Us. It was a joke because I wanted you not to look at this next generation as regular humans, because then you would treat them like we've always treated everybody. Here's the catch, or the takeaway of this specific point, is that millennials and older, 30 and older, what we've always seen is that the older generation looks at the younger generation and all we say is like, younger generation, why won't they? And one day the younger generation starts to behave like the older generation. That's always happened, which is why we can forgive ourselves and people for thinking and behaving like that. This point is to show you that the data proves that they are never going to behave like that. And I'm going to show you the reason why. It's called the perfect storm. Okay. And so I'm going to fly through this. Is such cool data. But the data is really this. There's 4 reasons, not only, but 4 reasons I'm going to show you why this generation is wired so differently. And what I'm telling you is that the world has shifted so dramatically that it's created a different human out of the box, the default, right? And they are the first sign, the first indication of what the new humans look like. And that's what we are getting used to navigating. So the first thing is technology. 4 things. You shouldn't be surprised that technology is so crazy and has changed the way we live our lives. No generation wakes up and decides they're going to be different, behave differently. There are factors that influence them. Again, we didn't have time to unpack that, but just trust me on this one. And technology is one of the ways. I can spend an hour talking to you about what's going on in the technology space. It will blow your minds if you're not in that space yourself. But I want to show you primarily that the speed at which technology is growing is so significant, right? We're looking at something as simple as AI. The doubling time of AI is 7 months. And what I didn't explain to you was something called Moore's Law, which I'm not going to unpack now. Moore's Law was correct for 50 years, and now it's just died. We've superseded Moore's Law. We look at the doubling time of all known information since the 1500s. It took 200 years for all known information to double. So from 1500 to 1700. Today, the doubling time of all known information is also 7 months. That's framing out a world that is so different from any world we've ever lived in before. Technology. I'm not spending tons of time on it, okay? The second one is world news. News shifted on the 1st of June, 1980. That's when Ted Turner went live with CNN News. And what happened with news, it moved from news to entertainment. Entertainment, there's only three things that sell in terms of entertainment: sex, horror, and humor. In the news, you don't see a lot of sex, so it's horror and humor. And if you watch the news, you'll see it's only horror. So this is connected to something called mean world syndrome. It's a cognitive bias that's been studied since 1970. And in essence, what this says is the more violent television we watch, the more irrationally fearful we are of the world outside. Irrationally fearful. What I'm suggesting to you is we plugged into World News 24/7 today, and the bias of news is horror and negative. And if you look at this data from last year, violent crime is completely down. None of us would have known. We're actually living in the safest, healthiest, wealthiest time in recorded human history, but we wouldn't believe it. That's the second thing. World news is skewing us to believe fear and negative. The third one is social media. Take a moment just to look at this. We all understand the incredible impact of social media. Australia thought they did an amazing thing, and they've just launched the fact that if you're under 16, you're not allowed to be on social media. They're just rolling out that this week. Here's what I want you to catch about this 2-year-old. Her behavior has already been modified at the age of probably 2 by social media. She's grumpy on the table. Why is she on the table? That's a whole different discussion. Stop, people. Let's not go there. But here's where we are going to go. Second, she sees the camera, the phone, she changes her behavior. We are being modified by social media. Again, with time, we can unpack that more. And the fourth thing has got 2 components. It's leadership and parenting. Shifted, and it's so dramatically different than it has been 15 years ago that it's part of creating a different human. So those 4 things, we could spend an hour on just those 4 things, are 4 of the main reasons why we're seeing a generation arrive that is just very different. It's their DNA, it's their default, it's their wiring. And so it's what we call a green world. So let me explain something to you. And this is a great analogy, because if you catch this, we're well on our way, right? The blue people are people that are 30 and older. They've lived in a blue world. And what I'm trying to show you there is that for generations, we've done things, we've seen things, we've experienced things. And that has determined in many ways how we behave. And it's been good and it has worked. That's why it has been passed on from generation to generation so well, which is why the older generation is always waiting for the younger generation to behave like they did, because they figured a whole lot of things out. That's the blue in this picture. So you have a tin of blue paint. Now, when I've just explained to you this perfect storm, that is yellow paint. And I can just imagine God pouring this yellow paint onto the planet, and slowly but surely, the planet starts to turn green, because blue and yellow give you green, okay? Mm-hmm. You guys good with that analogy? That's where we are. Now, the green world is where we live now, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. And the green world is amazing on a number of levels, and you have to understand that if you want to recognize how all of us are going to be called to behave going forward. So when you look at the green world, I'm going to show you 2 examples of how the world is turning green, and I'll give you a whole lot of resources should you want them. Okay, I'll make sure Cody can push them out to you guys if you're interested. Gen Z have never been alive as blue people. They've only been green people. The older people have been blue and are slowly turning green, because we don't have a choice. You'll be obsolete by 2028 if you don't recognize what the green world looks like and start to make some adjustments. And all of us already are, right? Did you hear what I said? You'll be obsolete. It's a scary thing to think of. The second thing about the green world is that when blue turns green, it can't go back to blue. So I'm telling you now that as much as we love what we've done historically and experienced and lived, we will not go back there. The tomorrow that we are all walking in will never look like yesterday, which for many, many, many generations, it really did in many ways. The third thing I want you to see is that aliens are green. Oh, baby. Aliens among us. Got it? Like, you guys are... Okay. 2 ways the world is green. So I grew up, and in middle school, I had an opportunity to experience this axis over ownership, and I'm going to explain it to you very quickly. Axis over ownership is just one way I'm going to show you the world is green, right? Axis over ownership looks like this. I get a knock on the door in middle school, and it's somebody selling World Book Encyclopedia. In fact, it was what's the other one? Encyclopedia Britannica. But you guys know World Book better, apparently. And so he comes into our house and he says, like, here we go. Would you like to buy this? Mom and dad say, no, it's a gazillion dollars. We can't afford it. But here's a time where we had all the known information on a bookshelf. This is a time where we had ownership over everything. Some of you might have VHS cassette tapes at home. Some of you might have CDs, DVDs. Some of you might even remember the time where on this thing, we could buy an album and download it for $14.99. And then because Steve only knew one song on the album, they would sell us the song for 99 cents, right? So what I'm showing you is the blue world was a world where ownership was the mindset. We really owned everything. That has shifted so dramatically. Where we live today is we live in a world of subscription. So I don't own any songs, but I have access to every song ever sung for $20 a month. I subscribe to all of these except Stars. I canceled my subscription a little while ago. And here's the point I want you to catch, right? The reason I canceled my subscription to Netflix was this, because for 8 months, I hadn't watched anything on Netflix. So the point is, a friend of mine is really high up on Netflix, and he said to me, stop it, Steve. And I'm like, I haven't watched anything for 8 months. Not one person I've ever asked thinks I'm a fool for canceling because I haven't watched for 8 months. People say I'm a fool for waiting for 8 months to cancel. That's a different conversation, right? But here's the point. The world we live in now, the green world, is a subscription world, which looks different. Philip, eunuch, what value do you have for me? If there is value, I will subscribe. If there is no value, I am out. So when you are pursuing a generation, if you don't recognize that they first have to see value, that's how it always should be. It should have always been that way, right? I'm not going to work like my dad at Siemens for 50 years and get a gold watch, right? That doesn't happen anymore. It's a case of what's the value of me being there? And that's in part what the subscription world looks like. There's a lot more to it, but we're going to move on. The second way I'm going to show you the world is green is something called information over application. So the first one was access over ownership. We live in a world where we just get access to something and we don't own much. That changes your mindset. It changes your attitude. It changes your mentality. It changes relationships. The second part is information over application. And so we live in a place where we have complete access to all information. We've never had that before. We've got a generation that were born with access to all information. Think about that. So the professor, the sage on stage, the boss who knows everything, all of a sudden what they bring to the conversation is no longer important because everybody has access to all information. I spend a lot of time in the quantum space. I spend a lot of time in the psychology, brain science space. I don't need one professor because I can access all that information if and when I want to. So we've got an entire globe that now has all the information they need. But what they don't have is application. Because you see, the blue people, millennials and older, we've actually learned some stuff over the years. And the green people, Gen Z and younger, while they have information, they actually haven't had a chance to do a lot with that yet. You see, the difference between information, when you take information and you add application, it's called knowledge.
Good.
We are info-obese, people. We are obese on information. And I'm telling you, the enemy revels in that because while we are captivated by capturing more and more information, it doesn't challenge us to put any of it into practice. And I won't even unpack the brain science, what happens when you think about doing things and don't do them. There's a whole brain science connected to that. And it's connected deeply to anxiety, depression, and suicide, believe it or not. So here's the point. Information over application. If I can bring application to somebody's information, I get a subscriber. The quick story on that is my son bought a stick shift car when he was 16, didn't know how to drive it. Of course, I have to teach him. So my opportunity to bring application to his life was amazing. I did a horrible job. He figured it out on YouTube. Here's the point. If I did an amazing job, he would have subscribed to me because I had value to give him. And that was a way to recognize the value as opposed to me saying, I know everything, right? That's how relationships are built. So very quickly going over it, please bear with me as we go. Information over application. When you can bring application to somebody's information, when you can walk alongside them to help them figure out something, you build relationship. And that's what application starts to do. And that's what subscription is, where someone chooses to run alongside you or allow you to run alongside them. That's the key. 4 muscles that are very weak in this generation. And I want you to understand it's weak in the green people. We're also a little bit green. The first is problem solving. The military have changed their process and their process to process and process. Well, how about that? Two very different things. To get people into special forces. They used to assess problem solving. Now they train it. Let that land for a second. The second one is communication. 35% of this generation's communication is digital. I'm talking to you about 4 weak muscles that need to be exercised, okay? And here's something that's so interesting. This generation, meaning the green people, have spent 40% less time in person with friends than millennials and older. Why? They are struggling to connect. Why they're more introverted, generally speaking, because they haven't had the exposure, and COVID was a part of that, which means they're about 5 years behind development compared to millennials at the same time. They're not broken. In fact, they're amazing. The third one is perseverance. Any gamers in the house? Cheat codes. I don't need to persevere at all. I just cheat. Yeah? That's just the tip of that iceberg. And the fourth one is something called gratitude. Gratitude is a really important part of this journey. We're in a time of plenty. We're in a time of abundance. And when you're in a time of plenty and a time of abundance, gratitude is deeply low. And what comes with low gratitude is being highly offended. The only way you bypass that is through a relationship. And I'll show you what that looks like as soon as we get to the DNA, which is where we're heading. 3 spiritual giants this group is navigating. I promise you we could spend an hour on each of these, so trust me and believe me, but don't be shy to reach out to me if you want more information, okay? 3 spiritual giants. This is a generation that's fatherless, literally fatherless, but also if they don't know the King of Kings, how could they have a father, right? And that being plugged in like this to a father, if you see the data about actually having an earthly father and not having an earthly father, brutal. It is unbelievable. And it's the most fatherless generation we've encountered. And if they aren't plugged into God the Father, well then, wow, yeah, that's a very difficult place to navigate from. The second giant they're navigating is identity. And they're putting on a different identity all day, every day to please everybody around them. And we know what happens in that space, right? When you don't know who you are in him, it's a very, very difficult journey. And there's actually 4, but I'm only sharing 3 because I'll tell you about the fourth one, self. We are celebrating self to such a degree that everybody else doesn't matter. And I think this is quite funny how this gentleman doesn't get that, like, yeah, I'm hungry, I'm eating pizza, and nothing else really matters right now. Taking care of self matters, but we've put self ahead of just about everything else. And we've celebrated that, oh, no, it's how would you like it, when would you like it, and what you like matters. Some of that is true, but it's not all true. And the fourth thing, which I'm going to just skip by, is a spiritual giant of fear. And that's connected to that mean wolf syndrome, where we're making decisions out of fear over faith. And it's not just faith in God, it's faith in the world, it's faith in a whole lot of different things. And so the fourth giant, which I'm not showing you today, is fear. But I will tell you, this is the smartest, craziest, awesomest generation we've ever encountered by far. Did you notice he threw his trash in the green trash can, not the blue one? Come on. That didn't just happen by mistake. We made that happen well, right? The most creative and innovative generation. So this is just a scratching the surface in terms of data. I want you to recognize there's something dramatically different about them. And your behavior, your interaction, your engagement with them has to look and feel different, because not all the things you used to do will get you the same results. And it's called stewardship. When God trusts you with something, he will trust you with more. You have to behave in a certain way to be trusted. And that requires you to continue to grow, to experiment, to research, to know, to understand, to see how to do that better. Often we don't. So let me show you what it looks like in terms of relationship. This is called the DNA of leadership, and this is the DNA of just about everything in connecting. I share this in the corporate space as well as in the faith-based space, and it is incredibly powerful. What we're looking for and what we're trying to understand is how do we get somebody to grow? How do we get them to be plugged in and engaged? How does that culture of their life, their home, their business, how does that work? And what is narrative? That all 8 of these are really important. So I'm going to fly through them very quickly to show you how it works. And we're going to begin at the bottom with relationship. It's the most important thing, and it's the thing that God celebrates and is most interested in. Okay. So relationship given. The more trust we have with someone, the faster our relationship grows. So I'm telling you, your solution is to build relationship and trust. When you have relationship and trust, it's so beautiful because it leads you to something called transparency. And this is where you can talk to somebody and say, hey, how can we get you to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday? If you don't have relationship and trust and you tell somebody that, they'll be offended. If you have relationship and trust and you tell somebody that, they will recognize that they have a log in their eye and want to grow. This leads to accountability. And here's what I want you to catch. Accountability is the tool we use. This is the tool you need to use to build relationship and trust. By the way, accountability has so many other components that are really powerful, but we use accountability to build relationship and trust. Because when you run with somebody and help them to do what they said they were going to do, you build relationship. Just that. By the way, the brain science around that, incredible and awesome. So relationship, this is how, accountability. This is what we think accountability looks like. That's the problem, okay? Accountability is really important. And the biggest thing that's missing with accountability is clear expectations. We don't take the time to have clear expectations. If I had to ask you to write down your church, your organization's 5, 6 core values, and then I said to you, tell me 5 ways that I can behave in each of those specifically. So when I show up to work with you for the first time and you say to me that stewardship matters to you, and you can show me 5 ways that I can represent stewardship, that's clear expectations. We're going to move fast. Accountability always leads to narrative. There's always a story that comes from being held accountable. And that story is what gets retold. That story is what determines how people connect and engage. The story is what attracts people. And it always comes from people being held accountable, because accountability is connected to relationship and trust. So it's always a narrative of how relationship and trust bubbles up new behaviors in people. That determines your culture. Culture is a beautiful thing. Culture happens, it isn't built. How does it happen? Through leaders understanding relationship and trust matter, through leaders holding people accountable. Those create narratives, and narrative validates your culture, which leads us to engagement. And all I want you to see is this. When we go from relationship, trust, transparency, and accountability, that is where we work the effect, the outcome with this generation. And it turns out with all 5 generations that are in the workforce, all 7 generations that are alive, when you behave like this, the fruit that you get is growth, engagement, culture, and stories that validate that. Narrative is also a story called testimony, right? So that's the journey we're on. So let me say this just in closing. I've gone crazy fast. Please forgive me, guys, but I want you to ask questions. I want you to see this. If you recognize that what this generation requires, this generation wants, and how they are activated most, it's a one-on-one mindset where you walk with one person at a time, you build relationship and trust, and that transforms them. That transformation, by holding them accountable to doing whatever it is they're supposed to be doing, one at a time, that creates a narrative, and you can't stop narrative from reaching people, not only around them, in their network, in their home, in their family, but people that are watching. That journey we have gone through for about 15 years, and the delight and surprise is it doesn't only work with the next generation, it works with every single generation. So I'm dropping out of this very quickly as soon as I can find this. And I'm going to apologize one more time for flying through this so quickly, but I want to say to you, 1, I hope that made sense. 2, you don't have to catch everything. The only thing you have to catch is that they're no longer the same. 3, all you need is a new perspective at looking, well, how can we build relationship and trust in a world that is a subscription world? How can we get subscribers? Subscribers will be interested when you have something of value to give them, when they can see that your motive is pure, and when you run alongside them and they see that value and motive showing up, That's what that whole DNA model ultimately ends up giving you. Did that make sense to anybody? Does anybody have any questions or pushback? I could go for another 2 hours if you had the time and explain that in detail for you, but I'm trying to value your time on a Saturday morning. So tell me what your thoughts are and your comments and your questions.
Hey guys, will you drop those questions just into the chat? That'd be easiest so we can grab them in order. But I'm super happy and okay with you going quick because I think people should take more time with you and bring you to their context so you can really unpack this in a healthy way because there's so much depth to it. Honestly, it's like a multi-session setup. So if you have a context that people need to be trained in this, this is perfect. Also, he's going to be joining us for all three conferences this summer. So, very excited about that moment. But yeah, drop your comments or your questions into the chat. While they're doing that, I'll start. What do you think is the single largest healthy shift someone could make today to better reach this generation?
Cody, the journey that Philip went on, he left probably one of the greatest revivals that we'd ever encountered, right? At the time, in Samaria, of all places, after having run away from Jerusalem. The point is that he didn't go to Jerusalem to the temple to find the eunuch. He met the eunuch in the desert, right? And so the way to pursue the single shift is to recognize we're not talking about stadiums. We're talking about find one person that you can pursue and change their life. We have so many data points of how many people have been reached with the gospel, but their lives have yet to be transformed. And so it's the premise of discipleship, which is connected to obviously mentoring or running together. And the idea is if we shift our mindset to really take what God has given us and steward them and those opportunities well, He'll trust us with more. And I'm not suggesting everybody's pursuing numbers, but I'm suggesting the depth of relationship reveals a motive. And motive is what everyone in this generation can see before you walk in the door. And the motive has got to be I'm with you because I recognize who you're needing to grow into. I said that poorly, but I hope you catch my heart in that. If we recognize that, just that the motive of our relationship is what's key here, that is where people subscribe because they understand your motive.
That's great. That's great. Okay. Okay. Hey, Christian wants to know.
How does Gen Alpha come into the mix with this and youth ministry? So I'm not sure I understand the question, but let me try and answer it. Gen Alpha and Gen Z, the reason I speak about them in the same context is this. We have both those generations' behavior and data points on those generations is exactly the same. In other words, they're like clones of one another. I didn't share this data point with you earlier, but Gen Z and Alpha are it's the first time in recorded history where we've seen a generation that's behavior is global, right? So Gen Z and Alpha Gen, how they behave the same globally. We've never seen they would behave different in Pakistan, in Pretoria, in Philadelphia. Like every generation would be different. But if I understand your question correctly, the way we behave with Gen Z, the way we recognize that relationship and trust is the foundation, the way we recognize that building a subscription mindset, how can I add value to them? How can I bring value to what they've already got? How can I come, I call it a GPS, a guide positioned by the side, a mentor. How can I walk with them for a period of time so that they achieve something? That's what creates that whole cycle. It's exactly the same for Alpha. So I don't know if I answered your question well, but if I didn't, restate the question. Okay.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Access over ownership topic. Okay, how practically we can show the youth that we carry value. So the access over ownership, one, I want you to recognize it's a mindset. What we used to have is I'm in charge of this church. I'm in charge of this business. I'm the father. I'm the mother in the house. Listen to me. It's no longer that. It's a case of you need to validate. You need to show me why I need to subscribe to you, because the premise of a subscription mindset is amazing, right? I can stay anywhere I want without owning a house there because of something like Airbnb. I can go anywhere I want without owning a car if and when I want to. So from a relationship perspective, it's always about where is the value, and value is created on that DNA chart with relationship and trust. That takes time. What it is doing, it's showing people that your motive is to grow them, to stretch them, to come alongside them. And it's something that I call mutual uncommon ground. One of the best ways to grow someone is not to tell them, I'm the expert, listen to me, but is to discover something with them. Right. And so when you look at this axis of ownership, what I want you to understand with that is that the green people, Gen Z and Alpha, their mindset, their default mindset is a subscription mindset. Is there value? If there's value, I'll subscribe. If there's no value, I'll unsubscribe. And I didn't unpack that in detail. There's a thing called an 8-second filter that comes with this. But excuse me, the point of this whole story is that that's how the green world works. Is there value? I'll subscribe. As soon as the value is gone, I'll unsubscribe. Now, what I want you to see is that while you're giving value, relationship and trust grow. And that's why, in my example of taking 8 months to unsubscribe from Netflix, when you win somebody over and they recognize your motive, the relationship and trust is existing, that you're coming alongside them so that they can be better tomorrow than they were today, they won't just unsubscribe. It's not like you have to show up as a clown every day. But once they've validated who you are and what your motives are, and they subscribe, they will stay subscribed, which means that giving you permission, because we live in a permission economy, they're giving you permission to speak into their lives. That's what you're looking for. And if you continue to speak value into their lives, they will change. And the testimony, the culture, the narrative of it is what will speak to everybody else. So I hope I did a decent job of answering that. Did that make sense?
Great.
Yes,
Okay.
amen. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I'm just reading Abner's point there. So what I have noticed about this generation, in terms of multiculturalism, is that if we're talking about just from a secular perspective, it's the most cause-driven, the most welcoming and accepting generation across just about every level you can imagine. So yes, we're seeing that. If you the secular mindset around this is be who you need to be, experience what you want to experience, and we're good with that. So I'm not sure if that's what you meant by multiculturalism, but if it is, just give me if I hit it right, Abner, because I can see you. Did I miss it?
No, yeah, it's something like that. It's about being if they're more, if the data has shown that they're more acceptance with being the second generation of Latinos in the U.S., third generation Latinos in the U.S., and it just a shift in mindset and in culture itself being more multicultural than future generations.
So then previous generations, 100%. I don't know about future generations. I think that's
Oh,
what you.
I mean previous
Yeah,
generations.
yeah. So 100% that's happened. But what you'll also see is that two opposing truths can both be true. So yes, they are more multicultural, but they're less accepting, believe it or not. In other words, it's got to do with something called the 8-second filter. What you believe now becomes an absolute truth to you. And while okay, that's fine for you, you can't be shifted easily. So once they have a sense of what they believe, they'll be okay and accepting of you not believing that. But to shift them is really, really hard, which is why motive matters. Because once you see Gen Z, Alpha generation, make a commitment for God, wow, they will deep dive and they will, wow, which is, I believe when we speak about this billion soul harvest, it's going to start with this next generation. They are going to be caught and so on fire, and the testimony is going to be so incredible that you won't be able to stop them. The point I was trying to make, multicultural, absolutely. Accepting, absolutely. Which is why getting them from their, I guess, funnel of what they believe to incorporate God into that space, that father and fatherless generation, if we can get them there, wow, they are on fire like no other generation. The risk, though, is that it's very hard to get them at times to listen, which is why you've got to move out of rows into circles. And what happens in a circle is testimony. Whoa, that's what's going to shift them, because testimony is, in essence, bringing application to their information. Testimony is what challenges the information because they can see an application. So I hope that made some sense.
Great.
It did. It made perfect sense.
All right, guys. Last question. Excited to get it.
Uh, okay, so here's the answer about working with the next generation and with an older generation. Here's what you got to catch. It's so beautiful, right? I built an entire business based on building this model to reach the next generation. And to my delight and surprise, it changed everything about how the older generations behaved. Here's the point. That DNA model I showed you, that is the kingdom of heaven, relationship, trust, transparency. I have a log in my eye, help me get it out. Accountability, help me, right? It's the kingdom of heaven. And so that's a biblical principle, and it brings fruit amongst every generation. So the answer to your question about multiple age and generations, once you start to behave like this is why the green world mindset is important, because you realize how I used to behave is not going to give me what I need. If I start to shift my behaviors in this way, in other words, to lean more towards the green, how can I bring value? You'll start to see every age group and every generation respond like you've never believed. That's the point. It's a biblical principle. We just didn't recognize it. And here's the thing. God showed us this in our business, and we started to transform how we behaved, how we trained, everything about our business. But the truth of the matter is, it's always been the best way to lead. If we look 25 years ago, that's how we used to lead, right? Now the green world, all these things have started to shift our leadership mindset, and God is bringing us back to a mindset of like, guys, you've drifted, and what you really need to recognize is that it's all based out of relationship and trust, which doesn't mean I'm your best friend, but it means my motives are sincere. My heart is to challenge and grow you. And that's what stewardship looks like. This is all about stewardship. Lord, give me this opportunity and let me steward it well so that you can trust me with more. And as I'm going through that journey, I'm learning step by step how to do this. And the beautiful thing, and the last thought, the beautiful thing is that that's your heart, your mindset. It creates an atmosphere around you that everybody's aware of, whether they know it or not.
That's awesome. Guys, will you put your hands together for my friend Stephen Robertson all over the chat, everything else? Incredible information. Again, you can get his book, Aliens Among Us, on Amazon, and you should also bring him for whatever you guys are doing, even if it's just staff content. I think the content is gold, and every single one of us are working with Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and ultimately, like, man, most of our staff is Gen Z. So the best way is to make sure that we know how to actually address, move forward, and equip people. Before you go today, I asked my friend Dan to jump on, and he's leading something incredible out in Cape Cod. I just spoke for him, and I would love for him to share about how they're reaching their local schools for Jesus with teenagers. So I asked him to share for a couple minutes as another resource. Again, you can jump over Stephen Robertson. I tagged him on all my social media stuff if you can't find him on Instagram. But also, man, bring him for anything. We're going to throw it to Dan so he can share real quick just testimony of what God is doing and how you can get involved in reaching your schools and how they can be a resource for you too. Yeah, so Dan, go ahead, unmute and jump on, please.
Can you hear me right?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the honor of being on this call. Recognize some faces here. Pastor Abner, how you doing, bro? And Steven as well. Honored to hear you always. And Cody, love you, bro. So, long story short, I'm a youth pastor for over 12 years here in Cape Cod. Actually, I've been youth pastor for so long that I'm a young adults pastor because everybody just grew. And yeah. So my story with the Jesus clubs is we were just hanging on a Saturday evening. The youth would just come to hang out at my house, and we somebody would just get a guitar and start worshiping, and the fire of God would just come in my living room, and people start praying tongues and prophesying and praying for each other, and healings would happen. People are being convicted of their sins and just crying out to God. And we on one of these days we're just in my living room, and the fire of God is just coming. People are jumping and they're running, and the Lord tells me, look outside. And when I looked outside, I used to live right across the street from Barnstable High School, and that's the biggest high school here in Cape Cod. And the Lord said, look outside. And I looked outside, and the Lord said, why do you think I put you here? And I was living in the house for like 5 years already. And the Lord said, well, get all these kids and start praying and prophesying upon the school for revival. And I got saved in high school when I was a senior at that very same high school. When I was bullying a kid, he was fasting and praying for me. And I got invited to come to this church. When I got there, this kid was playing guitar, and the Holy Spirit just completely wrecked me. And here I am today. So my whole story began at high school when I got saved, but I didn't know that we could actually enter the high schools and preach the gospel. So I got connected to a pastor that came from Brazil that connected me to Jake Mason from the Sicker Riders. And Jake Mason connected me to Brian Barcelona, the founder of the Jesus Clubs. And then I heard what the Lord was doing in California, how they were seeing over 20,000 students. They were reaching over 20,000 students on a weekly basis in California. I said, we want that here. How do we do that? So we had Brian come. He spoke at our conference, taught me how to do the Jesus Clubs. And then when we were about to start, the pandemic hit, all the schools closed. I'm like, how are we going to do this now? And then the school came back, and we actually had the principal of Barnstable High School uh, come at our youth ministry and at our youth gathering, because the Lord put in my heart that I was going to have coffee with that principal. And I just spoke to my wife. And then one day he's walking the hallway. He sees a young lady that used to come to our youth group and said, I want to come to a youth group. And then she said, all right, I want to give you Pastor Dan's contact info. We got connected. I went to the high school, sat on his office. I'm sharing my heart as a youth pastor. He's sharing his heart as a principal. And turns out he comes the same day. And the same day I gave him like 10 minutes to go up on the stage and say whatever he wanted. He went up there and said, I'm really surprised to see what happened here tonight. I thought I was going to come to a round table of 15 bored young students, but you guys are here leading worship, you're preaching. And he said, you guys have no excuse not to be great people in the future. You have Pastor Daniel here, and you have me at the high school. Turns out we go home that very same night, and me and my wife were about to sleep. A witch comes into my bedroom, wakes my wife up, and says, you think you won the battle? You haven't won yet, and disappeared. And then that's when the pandemic hits, close the school. And then when the school comes back, the schedule of the classes were not ready. They blamed on that principal and took him out of the school. And it was a complete spiritual warfare happening. That this principal was a different guy, because when I was going to high school, when the principal would show up, that meant trouble, right? But when this principal would show up, it's like it was a party. All the kids loved him. They gravitated to him. He knew everybody's last name, who had a crush on who played what sports. He was that kind of man, to the point that when they put him on a leave, the community started protesting. They had yard signs on every house, and there was a community hearing. But there was no way. They took him out, and we believe that he was the canal entering the school. But anyways, when the school came back, a couple of months after the school started, two other girls came to me at the end of service and said, Pastor Dan, would you pray for us? We want to open that Jesus Club at Barnstable High School. And I said, let's fast and pray for 2 weeks and see what the Lord says. That very same night, now I'm living in a different house. We went to sleep, and same thing happened. Another witch came into our room, woke my wife up, and said, you think you won the battle? You haven't won yet. On that night, it was an elder. It was an older witch, meaning it's a different level of spiritual warfare now. That night, we understood that hell is so desperate for what the Lord is going to do upon the schools. So we're going to start those Jesus Clubs now. So we started that first Jesus Club at Barnstable High School, and then we did Cape Cod Community College. And when we had those two schools, I had a vision from the Lord, and I saw the map of Cape Cod, and I saw that every school had a push light switch. And the moment we started that Jesus Club, it was like that push light switch was turned on. And then there was a wire that connected one school to another until every school in Cape Cod had a Jesus Club in it. And I saw the wire cross the bridge of the Cape, went up to the Plymouth County, and spread to the whole New England. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, I am taking the schools of New England with violence. And the word of the Lord says that since the days of John the Baptist till now, the kingdom of God is taken by force. Not only did the Lord say that, but three years after that vision, we have helped train over 30 schools in the region. And I think I've helped train over 70 students. I have a WhatsApp group with at least 57. They're either students, they're either leaders of the Jesus Club or co-leaders, or leaders that have passed the baton because they graduated the school. So I'm in constant contact with those students, and so overseeing the club, how it's going. And I truly believe that by 2030, we'll see every high school on New England with a Jesus Club in it. And a few testimonies, just so you know what the Lord is doing. My daughter was 11 years old 2 years ago when we were living in Barnstable. She opened her Jesus Club on her middle school, Barnstable Middle School. And first meeting, she had 80 students in a room. There were 26 salvations, including the teacher advisor. That this guy had an encounter with Jesus. Like something happened on his mental. He had like a mental health issue, and he started reading a Christian book. And then my daughter approached him to be a teacher advisor. He felt like it was a sign from God. And on that very first meeting, he gave his life to Jesus through a 11-year-old little girl, right? And then there was 4 instant healings at the same moment. Guys, we're talking middle school now, not even high school. And the Lord is moving, right? Another testimony, we are doing a gathering of the Jesus clubs in the region. So we're getting, for example, we have in a city there are 3 or 4 schools that have a Jesus club. So we gather those leaders and we do like a rally, like a whole day rally, and we just go after the presence of God. There's gospel proclamation, and then we go after baptism with the Holy Spirit. The Lord is doing amazing things, and so we on our someone on one of this events, one of these rallies. Before I went up on the stage, there was this young man. He said, "When I was 15, I was a runaway kid, always rebel, and now I'm 18. I got invited to come to this Jesus club, and I used to smoke weed every 3 hours to make sure I was never sober. But I got invited 3 months ago to come to this Jesus club. When I went there, I had an encounter with Jesus, and it's been 3 months that I don't put a cigarette in my mouth. And that's what the Lord is doing on those Jesus clubs. It's not only a hype, but every time I go and I speak at a Jesus club, I ask the students, "What's your name and what church you go to?" And I hear names of churches that I've never heard in my life. So we're seeing them in a public place, um, in their high school, and they're worshiping Jesus without caring what denomination they're from, what's the name of the church, what's the name of the pastor, what version of the Bible they read. So it is already revival. The Lord is on the move, and I was hearing Stephen speak about the next generation, Gen Z. They are the most bold generation that I've ever seen. I'm a millennial, and I'll tell you, to open a Jesus club in the school will be a huge barrier for me. And these kids, once they have a sense of mission, right? Once they have a sense of authenticity, I think that's what we have to aim for. If we are authentic as leaders of the next generation, if they found authenticity, if they see that we live what we preach, and they understand the principle, they're going to give their lives for the cause of the gospel. And that's what we're seeing up and down. These kids are leading Jesus clubs. I'm telling you, sometimes I train kids like this. There's 2 young girls that we trained for low, right? There are 2 huge high school clubs in the Lower County, and those were the quietest girls on those on that youth group, right? They were so quiet. Like, of course, we believe that we're training and the Holy Spirit can use, but I am so incredibly surprised to see what the Lord is doing with just a yes from those kids, because they're taking this to the next level. For example, Greater Low Tech and in Lowell, they started the club in a classroom. They outgrew the classroom. They went to the cafeteria, and now they are doing this on a weekly basis on the auditorium of the school, and they're seeing hundreds of kids in a weekly basis. Every Tuesday after school, they're meeting with 120, 150 kids, and the gospel is being proclaimed. It's amazing what the Lord is doing. I am so excited. And also, I was just in a meeting last week with Brian Barcelona, where they divided the Jesus clubs. They actually divided the nation into 10 different regions, and one of them is New England, 6 states of New England. That's Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and there's another one that I didn't say. Let's say Vermont, whatever. So 6 states, and I'm gonna be leading that chapter. So in January, I'm gonna go spend a weekend with them and I'm gonna be certified as a chapter leader for the Jesus Club. So I'm gonna oversee every single Jesus Club in the New England area. Um, and I'm excited to see what the Lord is doing. The Lord put in my heart, like I said, that by 2030, we're going to have all the Jesus clubs, all the schools in New England with the Jesus Club in it. And I said, Lord, how is that possible? How can it be like? How can we do this? And the Lord put a strategy in my heart. And I want you guys to pray with me about that. And we're going to start a Christian teacher summit or something like that. So if we are able to have a touch on the life of every teacher Christian in the school system, then they're going to be able to identify if their school has a Jesus club or not, or a Christian club or not. Uh, and if there is any student that are Christians that we are able to train and start the Jesus club. So that's a strategy the Lord has given us. I spoke to Brian. He had never thought about that before. So that's something that we're going to be working on. I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, but I am so excited about this vision that the Lord has given us. And the greatest thing about a vision is that we already know what the Lord wants to do, right? And I don't know how that's going to look like and what's going to require, but I don't care what price we're going to have to pay. This vision is consuming me, and I need to see that happen. So I want you guys to join me on that and pray for us. Pray for this vision. And like I said, like Cody said, I am here to train. I'm a certified Jesus Club trainer as well. We can train via Zoom. We can train in person. But if there is any student in your youth group or in your congregation that you can see as a potential Jesus Club leader, let me know. We can train them. And what usually happens is when I go and speak at a youth conference or a youth gathering, I usually tell the leaders, can you do a research and see how many schools you have represented on a youth group, and then identify a leader for every school, and then we'll just train them before the service, and that's what we've been doing. And I yield the mic.
No, that's awesome, Daniel. And I think that if you guys have it in your heart to reach your schools, which I believe we all do, like everyone on here is missional. I think Daniel is the perfect connection piece to get those kids trained, equipped, ready to go. You can try to do it on your own. It's a lot harder that way. It's much easier to partner with somebody who's got a burn in their heart for this. And I think you guys should contact him, reach out to him, partner with him. I know he's got a run. They have a chapel going on for their ministry school, I think right now. But Daniel D. Miranda is the perfect connection piece if you would like to reach your local high schools. Dan, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
I'm gonna probably type my phone number here, and also put my Instagram account so they can just reach out and get that.
That's perfect. I love you, bro. Thank you for coming on. We're gonna win this nation. We're gonna win this
Amen.
generation. Guys.
Amen.
We're
Amen.
not gonna be quiet.
Yes.
And God's putting the right people, the right places together. And the Northeast has been overlooked long enough. And Daniel's a great resource for you. So he's going to drop his Instagram and his phone number in here. Someone just texted me, how do I get a hold of him? So he's going to drop that information. If you can't find him anywhere else, you can go to my Instagram, go to the people I follow. He'll be in there, Daniel D. Miranda. But I love you guys. I don't want to take too much more of your time. And I just want to point you as well, theuproad.org, for who we are and what we do. All of that's going to be updated by the in the next 2 weeks with all of the upcoming events. We're doing citywide outreach in Rochester, New York. We're going to be up in Maine a little bit, but then we have 3 conferences: June 18th through the 20th in Indiana. In Maine, July 6th. No, June is Maine. July 16th through the 18th is Indiana, and then July 30th through August 1st for Horseheads. 100% free as always. And we're believing that God's going to show up, do some incredible, insane things as he always does. And I hope you have a great time. If you have any questions, you need any help, please reach out. We want to be a resource for you. And I love you guys. Have a great night, great day, and crush it with whatever Jesus has for you.
Thank you.
See you guys. Love you.